In less than a month, on Thursday, June 23rd, the Brexit vote is going to happen. The big referendum on whether the UK is going to stay in the EU or if it's going to bid it adieu, as they don't actually say in the UK. So that joke doesn't make a lot of sense. But it is coming up, and we want to cover this, break down some of the fundamentals for two reasons. One, most Americans aren't yet convinced that this is something that they should care about, which it is. And for two, because Donald Trump made clear today that he has no idea what it is or what's going on. And since there's at least a 50% chance he's going to be president, we want to educate him a little bit. And so on February 20th, David Cameron, Britain's prime minister, set June 23rd as the date for a referendum on the country's membership of the European Union. From that point, we had 12 weeks for which both of the sides could make their case, and they have been doing so. Because while David Cameron is for staying in the EU, a lot of members of parliament are not, as well as the leaders of other of the parties in Britain. David Cameron said, "The choice is in your hands, but my recommendation is clear. I believe Britain will be safer, stronger, and better off in a reformed EU." So they've been making the case, the politicians, the media has been making the case. Even many American outlets have been laying out some of the long-term consequences of what would happen if the Brexit vote was to go towards leaving the EU. And we want to give you a little update on the current state of the polls before we break down those consequences. Here are the trend lines going back quite a while, and it's fairly consistent. Remain in the EU is winning by 2 percentage points in the combined trend line analysis by the Huffington Post, with the amount of undecided going down just a little bit over that period, which stretches back months. Now, if you look at the individual polls, there have been periods where leaving has been winning, when staying has been winning, and so it's been complicated. And to some extent, there's a lot of different situations that have been affecting it. The debate about refugees coming in has led to people wanting them to leave the EU so that they can have more control over it.
It's not just refugees, though. If you are a citizen of the European Union, you are guaranteed immigration to any country that's part of the European Union. So right now there's I don't know if it's a big problem, but every day there are as many as 500 people from other European countries going to the UK. And so people living in the UK are wondering whether or not they have the resources or the ability to deal with, the large numbers of people that are coming into their country, which I totally understand that concern. The other concern is the fact that, people living in the UK are worried about their sovereignty. And so when you're part of the UK, there is a governmental body that could override vetoes within your own country, right? And so people in the UK are concerned about that, which I totally understand. And then the final thing is, the economy, and people are concerned that some of the regulations imposed on the UK by the EU are hurting jobs or hurting businesses. So those are all the concerns. But another thing to take into consideration is, the UK leaving the EU could lead to a catastrophe for the global economy. So there are pros and cons to both sides of the argument.
Yeah, I'm no expert on Brexit, which, by the way, if you want to get Americans interested, maybe change the name. So I'm not.
It sounds cool. It sounds like a celebrity pairing.
I don't know. It's strange to me. But I'm no expert on it. But we do know that the UK and by extension all of Europe was extremely damaged by conservative over there by their policies of austerity. So if you're going to do something that has a potential to really hurt the UK, on top of that, which they haven't recovered from yet, the very, very severe austerity, kind of their version of trickle-down economics, if you want, you're kind of pouring gasoline on a not yet healed scar, in my view.
Yeah, and many people have been making that case, certainly. Now, we want to break down one of the other things that could be affecting some of the politicians in terms of them being a little bit more amenable to the idea of leaving the EU. If we could bring up graphic 7, you're going to see a breakdown in the difference in votes for the different parties. So those are the largest parties in the UK. And you're seeing the bar are the 2015 elections, the more recent ones. The line is the 2010 elections, the previous ones. And you're seeing there several of the largest parties losing a bit of vote share over that. That's gaining a little bit of a vote share. But the UK, that's gaining a little bit. But the UKIP, which is one of the most, I guess they would say, pro-British independence, it's the UK Independence Party, massively shooting up in that time period, and a lot of people are saying that one of the reasons for that could be the push to leave the EU. And so the fear amongst people in parties that ideologically don't necessarily have a huge dog in the fight, could be that if they continue if you could bring that back up for one more second, if they continue along this path and don't push for leaving the EU, that they could end up like the next Liberal Democratic Party and lose a significant portion of their votes in the general elections. Now, we also want to bring up this next graph where you're going to see the GDP over time. This is stretching back a long time, more than 50 years. And you're seeing that there have been periods, like during the recession, where the GDP per capita has fallen. But it is raising more recently. Perhaps if that wasn't the case, you would see a clear preference for leaving the EU. Certainly this is helping because economic considerations are one of the most foremost in people's minds about this. Now, as Anna was alluding to, analysis by the OECD found that the UK economy would be just under 1.5 percentage points smaller in 2018 after Brexit than it would be if the country voted to stay in the EU on June 23rd. And if you bring up this next graph, you're going to see longer-term impacts on the UK and other countries. And so whether you have optimistic or pessimistic an outlook on the future, if they were to leave, it is going to hurt their economy. It's very easy for the people who are pushing for independence to say, well, look, we're paying the equivalent of these dues. We have higher regulation costs. But you're also getting something for those costs. It's the sort of short-term thinking that a lot of American states don't realize, that they're getting more from the federal government than paying. And really fast, if you could just bring that up for one more second, you'll see a bit of the longer-term impacts for other countries, because other countries are going to be significantly impacted in terms of their economy if they leave. One of the major points of the EU is to lower some of these tariffs and barriers, make it a little bit easier for these 23 odd states to trade with each other. And that's why it won't just be hurting the UK. It'll be hurting the EU as well. The world's largest economy could be badly damaged as a result of this.
So there was an Ipsos poll, yes, that looked into, just polling people living in the UK about their personal finances and what they think the Brexit would do to the country's economy. Or not to the country's, but the UK's economy. And what they found was actually really interesting. Although 2/3 of individuals believe that it would negatively hurt the UK's economy and possibly the global economy, they don't think that it would personally impact them. But it certainly would. And so that shows, in my opinion, a failure in the media educating the public about what the actual pros and cons would be of leaving the EU. But another thing to take into consideration is that 43% of the UK's exports go to European countries or EU countries. So that would obviously hurt them as well.
Yeah.
So these are all things that the voters should take into consideration. But the one thing that I will say is that I believe in democracy, and I think the referendum is the right way to go about this. I think that the people of the UK should make that decision, not anyone else.
Yeah, and look, it's impossible at this point to say where it's going to go. The polls are so close. There's still several weeks, and there's also the possibility of some sort of deal being struck beforehand. I know those attempts have been ongoing. But yeah, look, and it's impossible to not sort of see a reflection of what's happening in the U.S. psychologically amongst perhaps some in the UK who they hear about the refugees and then they hear about regulation, and independence sounds amazing. It's a word that has unavoidable positive connotations, but it has negatives as well, whether it's the independence that Trump is selling in the US or that some politicians in the UK are selling. And look, I'm not an expert on Britain or the EU, so I'm not saying that they shouldn't be independent. I've been trying to educate myself. I reached out to Emma Watson for a statement. She hasn't gotten back to me yet. But it seems to me that for the citizens of the UK and the citizens of the EU more larger, in a larger context, it doesn't seem like the best idea.